Thanks for coming again to a lovely evening of fun, talking about financial sustainability. And we do have a couple people missing, Edward and Nafe. I haven't heard from Jeff. I'm just guessing he's a few minutes late. So today's agenda, which there's copies around. Oh, I do.
I am we can share. Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about service level budgeting, a four-step approach to financial sustainability, price of government, we'll have a little break. Then we'll do fiscal capacity, and then we'll talk about the engagement HQ and balancing act, and there was some good dialogue that happened about ground rules and questions, the Q and A's and all that, and we'll touch on that at the very end. And so we have a special guest today, Garrett Oppenheim. Thank you for coming. Garrett has done work. How long have you been at the city?
Almost 3 years.
Yeah, so in that time.
It feels that way too, yeah.
Rob has put him to work and he's done some special things along the way, one of which is something called price of government. He has assisted with that work and he will be speaking to that today, as well as he had done service level budgeting slides before my time. And so we freshened them up a little bit, but they're pretty much as they were. And so Garrett has agreed to come and present on that topic as well. So we will hear from them a couple times and go through the agenda.
Is the door open for a reason? Is it too hot, too cold, or?
It's
It's just kind of noisy.
It is, yeah.
Thanks, Victor, appreciate it.
So, service level budgeting. Oh, do you want to switch it? Do you want to drive?
Sure.
Oh. Hopefully you can use my mouse. Sorry, it's the thumb one.
What's the track back?
Yeah, I know. Is it really there? It's there.
All right, so we'll talk just a little bit here about service level budgeting, which is the budgeting method that we use here in the city of Kenmore. This first slide tells us what some alternative budgeting methods are. These are methods that other organizations, whether municipal or corporations, use. Things like priority-based budgeting, budgeting for outcomes, zero-based budgeting, and the others that we can see there.
And we tried priority-based budgeting for a number of years, but we decided to create our own version, so.
And here's still some of the pitfalls of other methods. So with priority-based budgeting, like Rob was saying, the city wasn't super happy anymore with using it. You evaluate the programs as if they're all discretionary, when the fact of the matter is that a lot of them are mandated, things that the city has to be doing, so you can't really remove those. So it doesn't matter if they're, in your view, important or not. Yeah. And there's zero-based budgeting, which you try to start the budget from zero every year and rebuild the whole thing. Again, there's mandated things that you have to put in, so it doesn't really work well. I'm not gonna go into all of these because we don't use them, so let's get into service level budgeting. So as you see here, and as I've mentioned, all programs and services, they're not the same. Some are essential, others are discretionary. And service level budgeting is really taking into account that distinction in what type of program it is. We distinguish between discretionary and non-discretionary programs. So we break it up into, I'm going to go to the next slide. 3 different levels. And you see the target over here on the left. There's the core. Those are the things that the city has to do, whether they're mandated by state or federal law. They are essential and they have to be provided by the city. You can see some of these are road maintenance, police, a court, emergency management, things like that. The next layer out is basic services. These are considered elemental or inherent to what cities do. So it would be really hard for a city to stop doing some of these, like maintaining your parks or doing capital management, administrative functions like what says here, employee trainings and website management. And then lastly, we have the enhanced, which are services that provide added quality of life. They're really pretty discretionary. The city doesn't have to do any of these. They're not assumed to be inherent of city functions. And they are often provided by other entities or not just the city. So examples of these are recreation programs, events, affordable housing, the farmers market, things like that. And you can see that something like, if we like recreation programs is really an enhanced version of like parks and things like that. So you can see that a lower level, a core service can be provided at a more basic or enhanced level, and then we break out the costs as you'll see.
And enhanced programs, it doesn't mean that they're not important. They are important. It just may not be core to our mission as a city. They might be core to other agencies like the county or the state or a nonprofit.
So there's 7 steps or 6 steps in the process. It's even easier. There's 6 steps in the process when it comes to service level budgeting. Just read through them and then I'll go into a little more detail in the following slides. So first we identify all the programs that the city performs. Then we categorize those and whether they're core, basic, or enhanced. We assign costs and we look for the revenue streams that pay for some of them. We score them. We make budget recommendations and then we build the budget and present it to city council. So first up is the program identification. It's just what it says it is. We list out all the things the city does, but you want to be really careful in whether you're defining things as too broadly or too specific. Like you can take the police, for example, you can say that the police do traffic controls, or you can get down to the real minutiae. So like they give tickets for X, Y, and Z. And so you want to make sure that you're hitting that sweet spot. You're not being too broad or too narrow.
And that was the problem with priority-based budgeting. It was way too granular. I think we identified over 400 programs in the city.
I guess you don't have near as many. Not here. So then once each is identified, they're all assigned to the city department responsible for their oversight, and then we get to the process of categorizing them. And you can see from this flow chart, it's just showing us whether a program is core, basic, or enhanced. So we ask 3 basic questions. First is the program at the minimum level to comply with state and federal law, or the minimum level needed to maintain public order? If the answer is yes, it's a core program. If not, we go to the next question. Is the program or service a function inherent to being a city, even if it's not required? If yes, it's basic. If the answer is no, the program adds to quality of life, is more discretionary, or is not an inherent city function, it's an enhanced program. So we move to the third step, which is assigning costs. We have spreadsheets that were put together by the finance department. And you can see on the line items, those are all programs or services that the city does. And they've gone through, and this is an example, this isn't actually from any real department here. But you can see some things are in core, basic, and enhanced only, like office and operating supplies is basic only. But then facility maintenance down towards the bottom is in both core and enhanced. So sometimes a program will be split across different levels like that. So then the next step is scoring the programs. So once they've been identified, categorized, and costed, a committee made up of city employees scores them. And this is guided by the following principles. The enhanced services are scored on a scale of 1 to 7 based on how well they advance these 3 priorities: city council priorities, the comp plan's 20-year vision statement, and service vision and values. Then basic services all get a score of 7, and core services aren't scored because we have to do them.
Yeah, I mean, so we've only been through one budget cycle with this SLB method. Hey, Jack. We've only been through one budget cycle with this. And so it's not perfect, and this next budget cycle will make changes and refinements. And if you guys notice any head scratchers about it or anything, we're all ears, you know, so. It's just something that we decided to do on our own, given our kind of dissatisfaction with the off-the-shelf methods that are out there.
Are there any questions from you? Yes.
7 is good, 7 is better
7
than
is the
1.
best, yes. That's right.
And how'd you land on a 7-point scale versus your standard 5 or 10 or? Arbitrary, no problem.
Yeah. I don't know.
7 is usually a, when you have too many options, like a 0 to 10 or something like that, then answers often and tend to gravitate toward like one end of the spectrum. And so like a 1 to 7 or a 1 to 5 kind of,
Yeah, 1 to 5, I'm pretty familiar with that.
so.
And then if this all sounds really vague and esoteric, we'll actually see how this stuff comes into play as we advance in the slides.
We also noticed, Carl and I, when in looking at this, that the council priorities and the comprehensive plan vision statement were weighted double,
That's right.
and the service vision and values weighted at a 1 in the process. So, because I was like, how did we get to these?
So when you look at scores for 3 individual and you divide it by 3, that's.
It doesn't work, yeah, so. It's
3
weighted.
times for one and the other, and then
Yeah,
and then divided by 5.
the reason we did that, when the first 2 are worth twice as much as the third one. The reason we did that is because the first 2 are created by the city council who represent the people. The third one is created by staff who don't represent the people. So that's why the third one doesn't have as much weight.
Well, I think also by going to, rating of 1 to 7, it spreads them out, so when you start adding them all up and dividing, you can pretty much get down to just like 1 digit past the decimal. Spread them all out and not make them all the same number at the end.
Any other questions? On to budget recommendations. So the city manager, Rob, and finance director, Melinda, they work together to recommend which programs to include in the preliminary budget proposal and at what service levels. So like I said, some things can be core and then also at basic. So we might just say, oh, we'll just do that with the core, that's all we're planning for, or something like that. If there are not sufficient resources to fund all programs, the city council and staff evaluate whether lower scoring programs can be reduced, eliminated, made more efficient, provided by another entity, or supported through a new revenue source. And then lastly, we build and present the budget. So all decisions made in step 6 are included in the budget, which is presented to the city council and the community. The next slide shows us, this is from the last biennium, of the breakdown in the different levels and the amount of the budget that went to them. So in the blue, we see the core programs, those ones that are mandated, about 56% of the budget. 36% went to basic, those things are just inherent to what a city does, and 8% of the budget went to the enhanced programs. And here we can actually see what are the core programs of the city. So we have things like city council, code enforcement, financial services, IT, risk management, the city clerk's office, a lot of things related to the courts, police things, right of way management, parks. And we'll go back one step. And so these things, once again, we have 56% of the budget. And you can see the costs over here. These were estimates from 2022 for the current biennium. And then next we'll have the basic programs, which get to about 36% of the budget. We have things like front desk reception at City Hall, intergovernmental relations, the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that the city's doing, human resources. And then you can see some police things that don't go under core, but they come here under basic, like police training and crime prevention. And then we have facilities and fleet was also in core, but we have aspects of that that are in basic, and streets is here. And then let's start looking at some of the advanced programs, and you'll see where the scoring comes into effect. So this is the first quartile. These are the top scoring enhanced programs. And like I said before, we had a committee of employees, staff here at the city that went through each of these. We had descriptions of what the programs were and scored them based on how they fit each of these 3, the comp plan, the council priorities, and the service vision and values. So you can see all the scores for each of them there, and then the weighted score. And like Linda and Carla mentioned, the comp plan and the council priorities, we would double that. And then the service vision and values is not double. Skip to the second. And you can see that in this first one, the scores, remember, it went up to 7. They ranged from 5.4 to 7. We have 3 programs that scored 7 here: the climate action plan, legal services in support of these programs, and intergovernmental relations. So then if we look at the second quartile, you see 5.4 is just outside the range of that last one, and let's go down to 4.6. And here we have things like the radar expansion, which became Racer, recycling, the boathouse. So for the others, you can see the scores get lower in the third quartile and then the fourth quartile. Some of them get down to 2. And then on this slide, we can just, like we had the breakdown of that, I think it was 8% or so of the budget that went to the enhanced programs. We can see based on which quartile they're in, how much they actually cost here as well.
And can I interject in case anyone's comparing it to the last time, because I think this is out somewhere where you can find what was done 2 or 3 years ago. We did update this because we have added programs that were added in 2023. So those new costs related to CAP, Housing and Human Services, and Finance got added into here. So the numbers have changed.
Can you go back a few slides to the cost of the big, core programs? So, if you do the math here, it's gonna more than what the budget is. The reason is, there's some imprecision, is that a word, on this, because when we were trying to cost these programs, we had to cost out, staff time and all that, and sometimes that got double counted, or maybe not double counted, but like overlappingly counted. So that's a weakness that we need to work on for this next budget cycle, is how to better, more precisely estimate these costs. But that said, they do give you a sense, right? They could give you a kind of an order of magnitude, and so it was, even with the imprecision, it was still a useful tool for us.
So I saw the footnote on the other slide that some may be funded by other entities. Is that the same for some of the core? Or
Rather
none?
entities,
By, or has its own dedicated
funding
funding source, or maybe there was a grant or maybe another program
yeah.
in the core, or are they just straight only from our revenue or us?
I would say they're all us. But somebody,
There should be an asterisk. Can you scroll
yeah,
down to them?
environmental services is outside of the general fund, street fund. Environmental services is surface water fund.
Because we don't wanna rely on another funding source for our core. I mean, that's,
Right.
we should control that to make sure we continue.
Need to be able to cover it.
Yeah.
Quartile bar chart again, the 4 quartiles. So this is just interesting to me, right? That your least prioritized is a pretty big ticket. Put up against your core in
I
terms
think
of
it's
the costs
because
associated.
economic development is a fairly big ticket item, and so is events. So. This one. It's so big.
Events, it's big too.
On some of that, the cost estimate to run a regional aquatic center, I guess that was just for the research, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's just to do the research for it, it's just to run one of those, I think it was like, what, $1 million or $2 million a year? Okay,
That's
that's
not
what the latest study said, yeah. So that was just for research of it.
And this one, we had like the 25th anniversary celebration, which was $25,000. That's not a normal line item we would expect to see.
And these include staff time. So like the aquatic center research, that 13 grand was a staff time estimate.
And that, there's a big one, so the post office really pays for its own maintenance, but we have the building, so technically.
Yeah, the post office is pretty much what covers all of its own costs,
Right, still that,
revenue.
that's a big, one for 59.
Well, that's the end of the presentation, so.
We anticipate.
Yeah.
So this was, you guys, I saw the email exchanges you guys were having in the last couple days, and it was perfect lead up to this conversation, right?
It's the,
And Katrina,
Huh?
and your email was kind of suggesting something similar to SLB.
yeah, that's what the North Shore School District does,
Yeah.
basically, when they're doing their capital bond planning, is dividing things up into the 3 tiers.
So I like approaching budgets in this way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be SLB, right? It could be priority-based budgeting or other things, but I like approaching budgets this way instead of, 10% across the board cuts.
Mhm.
Right, this way is a more logical, community needs-based approach. As opposed to just slashing everything uniformly.
It does assume efficiencies, though, in the areas that are being funded, right? So that could be a different cut of looking at something as the efficiency of the category. Say there could be a core category that you're overspending and that you don't need to.
That's another slide for the.
That is, yeah, that's, yeah. A little bit is in there. That's not, it's not time for that one yet. Oh, yeah, no, it is. That is you next. Yeah.
I mean, those aren't typically big dollar savings, but there's some savings and they can add up if you have a particularly inefficient organization, right? But if you've already made a lot of those improvements, you don't have that wiggle room.
That's right, that is a really good point. And it's such a great point, let's talk about it. The next.
Yeah. All for
Also, I think it's good, I mean, you're small enough that you don't, there's some, like, what's going on in every department, so you don't have like department heads that are like, oh, I need this much money for this program, when really you're looking at it going, no, you really don't, So some of it, I mean, being such a small city, you can just see some of that right at the pleasure road. Versus a larger city where you do get certain department heads that like tend to, just because of just their personality, they can acquire more funds for their department than others or something,
Well, that doesn't happen at all.
Well, I'm sure they'd still try it, but it's a little easier, that harder to get away with.
That's true, yeah. Well, you were telling me that when you were in city of Seattle, tell me about how they were always trying to ask for cuts.
Cuts?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, so it was really horrible. So I was in the HR department, 100 employees, just in the HR department, but I did the finance in that department. And, during the budget, off budget cycle, all year round, like they're always threatening you with cuts and cuts and cuts. And so then they would say, okay, well, you have to cut this much. And then if you're gonna ask for anything, then you have to propose an offset to that ask. And so we would follow the directions and then they'd say, okay, well, we're just gonna take all your cuts and we're gonna give you nothing.
offset.
What? Even, yeah, they would just take whatever we would offer, right? And be like, no, you don't really need anything. I mean, it was so ridiculous. It was just so ridiculous, yeah. But you just never knew how they were gonna react and what they were gonna accept and not accept and.
Yeah.
It was all the time. It was all the time.
Just what
The bigger cities have a bigger cut,
Very
the bigger pie.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point to keep in mind too, because you fall into that trap of a lot of organizations.
Mhm.
You just lose all credibility in the budget process.
Right,
Right.
For the next year, what do you put up?
right.
How
Yeah.
honestly you
Because then we
approach
should be
it?
really strategic, right? We took,
Right.
oh, we're just gonna give them a little nugget. That's all we're giving them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you offer up something you know they'll never get rid of. Something core.
Washington documents. You go read them all out.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what Boeing would do. You give them an estimate of how much, what time it would take to do the job, and they would be like, okay, well, here's, you can have 3/4 of those out. So then, of course, everybody's overestimating so that they have time to do the job.
All right, yeah, so what we're trying to do tonight is give you different ways of looking at the budget and how to help us balance it, different lenses or strategies. So SLB is one. This next one was provided to us by the consultant that helped us 4 years ago, Steve Toller of Management Partners. So a couple of you might remember this. So he has a four-step approach to financial sustainability and so these are the four steps: reduce expenditures, and what that means is what you were saying, Holly, is just really looking for efficiencies.
Cost containment.
Mhm. Yeah, through things like lean and other processes. Yeah. And the next one is consider service delivery alternatives. What do we mean by that? A lot of it is like you might be doing something in-house that might be more be done. If you contract it out, it might be done more cost effectively, or vice versa. Might be having something contracted out that you can do cheaper in-house. And so over the years, the city has taken more things in-house, and it really was a cost-driven decision. So for example, we used to have King County do all of our surface water facility inspections. But we found that we could just do it for way cheaper, so we brought it in-house. Same with right-of-way inspections. So we used to contract that out. We brought that in-house because we could do it way less expensive. Building permits, we used to contract that out to the private sector. Again, we can do it way more inexpensively and in quicker turnaround time. If we do it in-house. Jennifer Gordon mentioned to you that she's still contracting with King County for 2 or 3 services. And when we get a new public works operations center, she's going to be able to bring those in-house and save additional money. She doesn't have the space to do that now, but when we get the new public works operations center, she'll be able to bring that in-house and save money. So that's an example. Those are some examples of changing how you deliver the service and how it can save money. Sometimes cities change the service delivery and it's more expensive. So for example, before Sarah Paulson and Caleb Shoup died in 2014, we used to contract out traffic engineering with King County, and we would get just a fraction of a traffic engineer to deal with our stuff, our traffic issues. But after those deaths, council made target zero, which is 0 deaths by 2025. That's next year, and 0 injuries, serious injuries by 2025. The council made that a priority, so much so that we realized that we needed our own in-house traffic engineer to really step up the service level. Costs a lot more money than having a fraction of a King County employee, but that was a policy decision the council made to get really serious about pedestrian and bicycle safety in the city. So that's an example of where we made things more expensive by changing the service delivery. All right, and then the third one is, tax increases or raising fees or taxes. And then the last one is service level reductions. Obviously, the first 2 you want to probably do in that order. Steps 3 and 4. You don't have to wait for step 3 in order to do step 4, right? You can do 4 before you do 3. So this isn't necessarily a chronological order, although obviously you probably want to take a look at steps 1 and 2 first. So
Suggestions.
yeah. Yeah, you just see some things there, some ways to do each one of those.
And then along the top, you can see with the first 3 areas, you're maintaining your service levels, right? So we're still providing the same service levels. We're just figuring out a more efficient way to do it or raising money to do it. And the last one is we'd actually be changing our service levels for the community.
So a question here under the increased revenues category, would there not also be something there about grants or programs that bring money? Or is that considered outside of this process because it's not something the city can count on the way it would if it raised a tax or a fee?
Yeah, grants are very tricky, as you know, and they're not, they're not sustainable over a long period of time. That's usually you're gonna have it for, a year or two, or maybe a few years more, but.
So it's kind of gravy and not the meal,
My idea
right?
of time with a lot of constraints
Yeah.
on the use.
But I think I know what
But it is a revenue increase technically for at least some period of time in some
Yeah.
program or it offsets
To
some
get things
costs.
going.
Right, yeah.
But another example of that is, selling ad space in our newsletter or
Right.
putting advertisements on all of our city trucks. I'm making this stuff up, but, but I think you're onto something, or are there other ways to generate revenues that we haven't thought of?
That aren't the base
Yeah,
in some way, that aren't coming from the individual in the community.
But now that we have the web base, we can do our own, park shelter rentals very cheaply and then add revenue.
That was all for them.
yeah, so what we're doing tonight is just trying to give you additional tools and information. Because this is the last night that we're doing all the talking. So for the first 2 months, we were just trying to get you up to speed with all the budget stuff. Then the next 2 months, we're turning it over to you and you're trying to help us figure it out. So we got a couple more things we want to show you.
Garrett's back up again, but it's 4 years out.
And while Garrett's coming up, I can introduce this. This is called price of government. And price of government was a term that was coined, feels like 30 years ago, or whenever Gary Locke was the governor. He espoused this way of looking at things, the price of government. And basically what it is price of government theory is that there's kind of a comfort level or appetite for taxes. And it generally tends to be over time, a percentage of your household income. And so there's a book called Price of Government. It's done a ton of research and it's shown how tax burden over the years has stayed pretty constant as a percentage of household income. And there's been times where taxes got a little too high and the voters revolted and shoved taxes back down, but then services went down too. And so voters would say, hey, we need to bring services back. And so it's never constant, it's kind of bouncing around, but it tends to stay kind of within a range of personal or household income. So we decided to take a look at price of government as it just pertains to Kenmore, recognizing that your average taxpayer doesn't make that distinction, right? They just look at their overall tax burden, federal, state, county, city, schools. But we still thought it would be helpful if we looked at price of government, just as far as how much of a percentage of income, of household income has Kenmore's revenues, or specifically its taxes, been consuming over time.
That's most of them I have to say. Sorry, this one's not nearly as elaborate as the SLB.
Yeah, but Gary, you'll show the findings and.
Yes, yes. So here you can just see kind of all the data that goes into calculating the price of government for the last several years. The key numbers, and see the cursor, right?
Yeah.
Key things that we look at, like the number of housing units and the household income. And using that, we can get the aggregate income by multiplying those together. So you can see there's just shy of $1.3 billion in total income in the city of Kenmore as of last year. And you see these numbers go up by about 10% every year in terms of the household income. The number of housing units has been going up. Not quite as consistently, but it's gone from 9,300 6 years ago to almost 9,800 now. And that's why we've gone from 873 million to, like I said, about 1.3 billion.
Where are those data points gathered from?
These are all from the US Census.
Okay.
In the American Community Survey.
Yes.
Yes.
And then down here in the revenue sections, the parts that we look at are tax revenue without sales tax, because sales tax can get paid by people from outside the city, so it's not really something that we want to include in how much, you know, Kenmore residents or tax burden is necessarily. So we subtracted that out for this line. So for last year, for instance, it's 8.6 million. And then we add in the surface water management revenue. The TVD, sorry. The TVD revenue is the car tax. So that's about $455,000 last year. And then the cable tax utility and the surface water utility taxes, those are both new. And the numbers for last year were 329,000 and 203,000. And so we add up all these different revenue sources and we divide it by the aggregate income. And that's where we get this price of government. And so you can see that over the last several years, it has been pretty consistent. From just over 1%, 1.4% in 2018, again, 1.04% in 2019, went up to about 1.07% in 2020. And then it started to drop below 1%. So it's 0.996 in 21, 0.978 in 22, and then just about the same this year, 0.981. And then you can see this graph, which shows us the blue bars represent income, and you can see how that's been going up. And then the percentage of or the tax burden and price of government is the gold line. You can see that it's been very consistent going back to 2015, just going down a little bit, in fact.
What's interesting is that going down a little bit in the last couple of years, that includes the tax increases that the city council has imposed in the last year or two. So wait, if the tax burden has gone up, if city council has increased the taxes in the last couple of years, why is the price of government actually going down a little bit?
It's a ratio.
Right.
It's growing slower than income.
Income.
Yeah,
I thought the way you were talking that we'd see a chart that showed relative to the income per year, that the percentage stayed the same, which meant it would have been climbing with it. That's what I thought you were saying. So this is surprising.
It makes sense because if income, so if your number of household is increasing by 5% and your income per household is increasing by 3 to 5% for a total income increase of 10%, but you're only increasing our tax basis by 1.8% for property taxes, and then adding a couple things on there, like 1.8% compared to the 5 to 10% of income. That's the disparity, right? That's the disparity that we'll see here. That's also the disparity of what the expenses are compared to what revenue we're able
But the ratio feels pretty intolerable for 2015 versus 2023. Right?
Well,
Unless I'm reading numbers inaccurately.
I don't think that Kenmore has ever, I think the threshold for intolerable is probably quite a bit outside of what Kenmore has ever.
It's about 0.25%. So,
Okay,
yeah, it's a pretty small change.
okay.
so if we start adding, like ADUs and stuff. I mean, we're adding a bunch of smaller houses, and like we're adding a bunch more multifamily lately. Are we assuming that it's like the same household income for them as it would be for like the houses that have been there for a while?
I actually don't know if it was counted as separate household or not. I'd have to look at how the census defines that.
Or are they calculated as just the total value of one property for taxation or valuation?
And Mary, you've been.
Well, yeah, it was a very similar question, and I don't know how it fits in with this, just coming from financial services. Is this an average income or median income? Because that also makes a difference. I know we did business because this year you could have these multimillionaires skewing the numbers a lot.
For every year up until last year, it was the less skewed. The last year I haven't been able to find
For the median.
the less skewed.
Do we find that average household income is normal in Kenmore, or is it not, is it all over the place?
you can't get that kind of distribution data. Like you can't get a normalized curve.
Well, we know what people are paying in property taxes, we know what they're paying in sales taxes. Is there a lot of inequality in Kenmore? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there is census data to show like the number of households that are at different,
Yeah.
income levels. I don't have that on me.
Right.
I'm curious about
Are
that.
there a way to look at the price of government from different income level in Kenmore?
Be more difficult, but we could estimate.
I'm just, as we think through the next phase of it, obviously increasing revenue is gonna be one of the tools, but how do we do it in a way that's more equitable? So I think this is allowing more of a bird's eye view, but, it would be nice to see it break down the impact of it for the different population, especially the more vulnerable population, how that would impact them.
Yeah, obviously you could do it on an individual level, because you could see exactly how much.
Right.
Taxes people are paying, what their car tags are, and the cable. Bills. It would be a lot of generalizations, I think, to look at, different income levels, because you'd be making a lot of assumptions about those income levels, those groups.
So, this is actually like perfect timing here, cause, for the first, actually for the first like 30 years we lived here in Kenmore, our mortgages always, included our property taxes. And so you're just paying a little bit each month and you don't really pay much attention to it, or as we didn't. And so we actually got our first like real property tax bill for the year. And I was really surprised to see that, the amount we're paying to the city is like just under $800. So I was surprised it was really that low considering the overall amount of our property tax. So it actually was making me think, it's like, okay, I know that there's other sources that we're paying with the utility taxes and the franchise fees and all that. So, so I actually started looking through, all of our, utility bills and our Department of Licensing, and figured out over the last 4 months how much we were paying to the city of Kenmore specifically. And so, and of course, I use Rob's methodology, is that my house was the average Kenmore house. Okay, so I was surprised that actually, now this was during the winter, so Puget Sound Energy is gonna be higher, and we're paying like less than $200 a month to city of Kenmore for all of the services that they provide. And so, if anybody wants a copy of it, I have them if you wish, but that was just,
Is that utility taxes and property tax combined, or?
yeah, well, you can pass it down. You want to, 2,400 square foot house, 2 occupants, so we pretty much Pete and mainly live upstairs, but, there's more, if anybody wants a copy, feel free to grab some, but I was just, I just saw that and I was curious, and so I just ran through the numbers really quick and threw them out there.
It'd be interesting if anyone else wanted to add their information to this too and see how consistent it is.
I think there's a good point here, though, ultimately about talking to the community, which is, let's say this group recommends some tax increase be put before the city council, or that they consider it. I think a lot of people see a property tax bill and they assume it is
Right.
going to one place, which is the city they live in, and that it's exorbitant. And so there's an educational part of all of this in
Right.
terms of the tolerance for taxation. And, the library is tax funded, and so that was my career field, and we had to go for a levy every time we had this shortfall issue that we're having here. And the way you spoke about it to the community and educated the community made an enormous difference in the vote.
Definitely, yeah.
Because people have a tremendous range of very inaccurate assumptions about the costs of things. So I think it brings that to mind for me.
Yeah, definitely, because I was, this includes police services, right, because that's, but
Yeah.
then also looking at that property tax, fire and EMS was like $1,300 a year we're paying. And that's probably their only source from us. They're not getting all these other taxes, but to compare that to, that's just for fire and EMS. Not that I'm saying we should reduce them anyway, but, compared to what we're getting with through City of Kenmore for police and all this other stuff, you know, that's what I'm thinking of.
One of the most difficult things about all these taxes is the way the biggest variable tax is your home, right? Your home size, your home value. Because you have a bigger home, it's costs more to heat it, therefore you're paying more utility taxes. That's like a little bit variable. The biggest variable is your house worth, right? So if you have a $1.5 million home versus you live in a mobile home, you're gonna be paying a lot more taxes in the 1.5 versus, but the income of the person living in the $1.5 million home that they bought 35 years ago for less than $100,000, and now they're retired and on Social Security, their income is not in line with the value of their home. And so,
Yeah.
whereas normally you would be able to say like, okay, you know, a normal progressive income tax, you say, okay, this is the tax burden of someone who is in the top 5% of earners, and here's the income tax burden, or here's the tax burden of someone in a lower bracket. This, you can't, there's gonna be people in different incomes in all of the different tax burden brackets.
Right.
And I think that's what Tiff was trying to get after. Is
Yeah.
there a way to, talk about impact versus ratio per value? Right.
Right, I mean, which is why we have two people living in a 24, because we would lose money by trying to get into a smaller place.
I have a question, the Department of Licensing numbers are 40, they're showing 40 each month.
And that's per annum, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty,
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
yeah, that's another reason why we did, okay, yeah.
so you're paying even less.
So that'd be less,
Yeah.
a fair amount less.
Yeah, I get it.
And that, surface water management fee seems high to 66.
Is that an annual number?
And that was, surface water management was 2640 a month, and then there was, on our property taxes, it was divided up between surface water management and then just to the city of Kenmore. The one was 2640 a month and the other was
Oh,
6690.
I see, so that's property tax also. Okay, yeah, the 26 sounds right. Okay, never mind. But yeah, you can take that 40 and divide by 12.
Yeah. That's gonna be,
Really helpful, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I should do the same for my house.
I think what we could do, rather than trying to stratify like from actual data, we could just put together a couple hypotheticals to give us kind of a range of experiences. And so like this is our retired folks in a 2,600 square foot home. This would be their property tax, and like that's their burden on a fixed Social Security income or a pension income or something like that. And then you do me, you know, in the middle of my career, like owning a home sort of thing. And then the lower income, I was actually just looking up the income data, and it's like we've got 20% of household income is under 50K, 20% in the 50 to 100, 26 in the 100 to 200, and then 33% is over 200. So we've got a pretty good like skewed toward the higher incomes.
I think where it might matter to the work of this committee is that as we're talking about, and I don't know what the structure will be for us, and you know, we'll want to talk about that at whatever's next at some point, but I think where it would matter is if we want to recommend something, we look at it through a lens that recognizes who might be disproportionately impacted by it.
Mhm.
You know, that's just one of the ways to look at whether or not what we might be recommending holds the right water for all of the residents of Kenmore. I think that's where we would plug into that data set in any way.
Yeah, but that would be good that if we are targeting some of these utility taxes and property taxes at that time, because there's already several programs set up where they are actually not even, so even if we increase them, they're getting a less increase than what we put on there because they've already.
Right, subsidized for people with
Yeah.
different, like seniors or whatever. Yeah.
Right, and different income levels already have those programs in place.
Out of curiosity, you said that there's you know, this price of government and there is an intolerable percentage, is there, I think what is always helpful is to know what our comparable cities are. What is the price of government for other similar cities in the region? And then, like, what is that acceptable range? Is there any kind of academic or more broad, like, consideration of where that price of government has gotten too high and there is sort of this right sizing, I guess, because the tax burden is too high. Do you have any of that data or could potentially get it?
We don't have the data for other cities. I'm answering the question on what is the limit for, so the book, The Price of Government, was written about 25, 30 years ago. It talks about how, you know, taxpayers have a hard time distinguishing, you know, local government from county, you know, they just see it all in the public tax bill. And so the book talks about an appetite or a max tolerance for overall taxes. But I don't think the typical voter would say, oh man, you know, all my city taxes combined are just too much for my salary to handle. You know, they look at all their taxes, so they get a sense of all their taxes. So I don't know if there's been any research on tolerance level at the local level. I think that's the book talks about how it's just in aggregate. But as far as getting price of government for how we compare to other cities, I think we could do that. It would take a little bit of work. But we could, yeah. Because we have the same data, right? We have utility taxes, property taxes.
Yeah,
Meetings.
we don't, we can, their budgets. Financial statements.
We'd have to, where you have cities with. Oh, no, never. Well, yeah, you have to take out
Similar services.
Similar
Yeah.
contract cities.
we have to look at contract cities. We try to take out like fire. Because fire costs aren't in here.
Right. At least make a note that, you know, like,
Steve Toller did, you might look and see what he did the previous time, because that was one of the things that he did.
Some of that information is in the fiscal capacity comparisons for sales.
So that's what I was wondering is if this
Utility
utility, I can
tax,
get
yeah.
some of it.
Yeah, it does.
Mhm. I think in terms of the work that's before us, the idea would be to just understand if we're gonna recommend revenue increases that are an additional tax burden, how does that compare to other communities? How does that compare to the tolerances that this community already does or does not have? Otherwise, I don't think it's numbers that pertain to our work.
We've done some of that work because we have like lists of the utility rates that like neighboring cities have. We've been in all the cities that have like admission taxes and things like that, what they charge.
Is that the next slide deck?
It is the next slide deck. We are scheduled to have a short 10-minute break. If y'all want to have a little break first, and then we can resume at 7:35. That work? Good to move?
We still recording?
Yes, I'm just gonna try to.
Does that mean we're not recording?
No, it's still recording. If you want me to stop recording.
Just know, you guys, we're still recording on break.
oh, yeah.
No?
Um,
Feel free to. Get on out.
it could have been enough. I didn't think that was behind it. Yeah. Was there an extra one of those by the time I got here? Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, those last two lines are messed up. Oh, okay. Should be $3 divided by $3.33, $3.34.
So let me ask you a quick question. I just, coming from some public agency, I just would hate for us to do it. Some of us are pressing that doesn't put you under our charge. So I keep trying to put that, really just trying to balance that, but I just don't want you guys.
Well, yeah.
If it doesn't hurt at all.
And I'm hoping that these
Some of us
slides
are-
will give you the comparison that you have.
Because I think everybody is just so inherently interested. They just want more data, but if it's. I bet he's in there. I'm too. I'm like, it's like I've been in heaven in all these first meetings. I love learning this stuff, but, there's only so much you guys can do.
Right,
It's just only so much you can
yes,
do.
we've. put
Oh, I'm
in some
feeling for
hours.
that.
And I agree with you, if you remember when we talked about the DEIA toolkit, we gave you that, and we really want you guys to think about, okay, how is this gonna impact, the community?
Yeah.
What are things we can do to help those that,
Yeah, what are the criteria for what we recommend and what do we think about as we're making a recommendation? Yeah.
it's that's.
And hopefully, I don't know, I should probably just bring it up in front of the whole group, but that we'll have some sort of structure within which to do this work. Are you guys gonna structure this a little bit, or is
That's
this?
a great question, I'm learning as I go too.
Yeah, because I think a free for all would be a bad idea.
Luckily, I believe that Jeff has done this before and really kind of rallied the troops around, his ability to create spreadsheets and gather data, in a concise way. So I hear that he's so I'm hoping that he will take the lead once the ranks get turned over. But yes, I definitely need to, every week we meet, like we meet before these meetings, we do a debrief after the meetings, and so we'll talk about the next meeting, and so I need more clarity for sure, because I've just been scrambling to get.
Oh, gosh,
The
of
data
course you
together.
have been. Yeah, I think, facilitated structure always helps people achieve.
That's how
process
it's made
much better. And I think if one of the team members just sort of takes charge, particularly with a smart and accomplished a group as this is, it could create friction. So my assumption is we ought to have some clear process and guidelines, and maybe rules of some sort without overcomplicating.
Okay,
Just a thought.
no, I like it. Do you want to sit here? No, do you want to switch out?
Oh. Sure, but I need to.
I mean, you don't even have to use a mouse, you can just use the arrow button. And just use arrow and you'll be fine.
Google Maps is still on part of my brain.
Oh, that's what I think the movie was showing. Because all you do is.
Yeah, it's, yeah,
Exactly.
That's been fun.
I outsourced.
Well, next on the agenda is, our fiscal capacity and city comparisons. So, it leads right into all these great questions. And I just have to say that I'm sitting here and going through this for my first time. And Rob's been through this, that, Rob really laid out, okay, we're gonna have these meetings and here's what we want to do for the first 2 months and we'll talk about this and then this and that. And I feel like, hopefully you guys agree, it's moved really smoothly. And I feel like everything is just led so nicely with your questions and what we're talking about. And so kudos to you, Rob, for setting it up very nicely for learning and going through all this information.
So some of the things we're gonna go through what Jeff described in the management partners report from, it was August of 2020, which is still out on the website. The comparisons of other cities and different rates related to taxes and income and populations. Go to the next slide. And what is fiscal capacity? The ability of government agencies to generate revenue and the factors that contribute to the tax base. Ability to efficiently tax other non-tax forms such as grants, undeveloped land, which we don't have a lot of land. Then key takeaways, fiscal capacity is total revenue a city can realistically raise given available tax base constraints and availability of non-tax sources. Starts with available tax base, the amount of wealth and income under the taxing authority's jurisdiction. There's only so much we can do as far as property tax, sales taxes, utility taxes. And then here are some of the cities in our area. A couple of them are a bit smaller than we are. Shoreline and Bothell are larger. Mill Creek is really the only comparable as far as median household income and population size. And the Washington State Office of Financial Management is where populations came from here. And then form of government and the sales tax rates. So again, Shoreline and Woodinville are contract cities or have a separate fire district. A lot of the other cities have their own in-house fire police. Sales tax rates, they're all between 10.1 and 10.6. Snohomish County has a little bit higher sales tax rates. Woodinville has unincorporated, the non-RTA lower rates, so the averages 10.25%.
And 10.6%, I didn't realize.
For Mill Creek or for,
That's Mill Creek, yeah.
Creek ends,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm at, Mallard Terrace is 0.5.
Make sure not to go shopping.
Well, then,
Property tax rates seem to be a little less as to Hellish County, but the sales tax rates are higher.
And like, well, in Seattle started adding like the extra sales tax if you're doing like a soda or things like that, so
The sugar tax,
yeah.
that was part of balancing the budget.
I lost it.
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember if I actually.
absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so like, I mean, at the time, I could get a Coke here in McDonald's for $1.10, the same thing in Seattle was $2.99. So it definitely added.
Okay, and then home values, average value, population information. So Bothell has King and Snohomish County, and the Snohomish County median home value rate was higher than King County. Residential assessed value, as from property tax records, King and Snohomish County. And a lot of the information in these slides are pretty comparable to what it was back in, I think the research was done in 2019. Or the data was from 2019 for 2020. But property values, median home values have gone up 40 to 50% from that time. If you go look back at those slides, that's one thing that really stood out that.
And the difference between those first two columns, it's one is Zillow market rate and the other one is King County assessed value, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's not much county.
And these were done when? Oh, these are new.
These are new, so this was 2023 information, King County 2023 and Snohomish County actually had their 2024 on the website.
Bothell has so much new construction, I wonder if that number's gonna pop.
And on city assessed value per capita. So this is the whole city in whole. You can see Mercer Island is huge. Yeah.
That's all that.
Yeah. So there's only 3 cities with lower average value per capita than Kenmore, Terrace, and
Mill Creek and Short.
Sure. City assessed value per capita.
I specifically asked for this slide. The previous slide is, comparable neighboring cities. But I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the bigger, wealthier cities. These aren't cities we normally compare ourselves with, but just want to give you a sense of Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond.
Yeah, the other side.
Yeah, so this is assessed value, yeah. Assessed value, so look it up, we're,
Yeah, why is that levy rate? Can you guys
Did that
explain
be a
that?
percentage?
No, it's like, that's the rate.
$1 per 1,000 of assessment.
Yeah.
so that shows you, so when the more expensive your home, the lower your levy rate can be.
Okay.
So people in Kirkland have a lower rate, but they're probably still paying more property taxes because of their home values.
Mhm. Yeah, because Lake Washington typically has an easier time getting their bonds and levies passed because they have such a large business base. The rate for the actual residential homeowner ends up being really low because there's so many businesses that are also paying into that.
That's a good point. This covers all real property in the city, including business, not just homes.
Okay, general fund sales tax revenues per capita. So this is percentages compared with the 7 cities. Kenmore has the second lowest sales tax revenue and sales tax per capita, with Lake Forest Park being gonna be one that's lower. We have a lower.
Is that
tax
just a
rate.
function of the fact that we don't have anywhere to shop in our community?
That's right.
Is the,
One thing that has helped us out, has leveled the playing field a little bit, is the Wayfair decision back in 2018. It was a Supreme Court decision that said that cities, or that online retailers have to pay sales tax where they're sending it. And so we saw a bump in our sales tax revenue right after the Wayfair decision. And so it's kind of, that helps level the playing field for residential cities like us.
And that was kind of good timing when COVID hit, what, a year or two later too, that we had
So
money
that's,
coming in from online. So-
everybody was ordering versus
Yeah.
shopping in a location.
yeah,
Yeah.
so then that sales tax revenue is just what's coming out of Kenmore, or is that what's coming out in everywhere?
So that's the amount of sales tax we get. Posited to our bank account from the state.
Oh, okay.
So that was the Washington's, let's see. State Office of Financial Management was population, trying to think which, Department of Revenue, you can find each city with their sales taxes. General fund sales tax revenues per capita, Kenmore has a smaller sales tax base than other cities. As we said, we have less flexibility in budgeting with this revenue source. And this is large cities, and we were looking at, that's right, we ran out of time. Rob added some slides.
We didn't have time to do the far one, yeah, sorry.
Third place, general fund revenue was like 200 million, it was huge. They're,
If I could just talk about this, like, so remember, we were second to the lowest of the poor cities in the last slide. But now look how we compare to the rich cities. Look at that, like, what, they're triple us. Well, not Kirkland, but Kirkland's double us. And Redmond and Bellevue are about triple
Yeah.
per capita in sales tax.
okay, utility tax rates. So these have changed a little from the 2020 information. Not a whole lot. Mill Creek is still the only city. I reached out to their finance director and to verify they still have no
Yeah.
utility taxes, and she said currently no, so I don't know if that means that they're looking into the, because it's been a long time that they.
Their FSP task forces.
But you can see across the top where the limits are, right under the headers, what the maximum rates are, so.
So for example, Kenmore could go up an extra 2% in electric.
2% in electric, and then if you kind of look at where we're at with, stormwater, you can see some are at, 10 and 8%. The average is 7.2, so, in comparison to others, like, there's wiggle room, there's no limit on that rate. We are at 10, which is the max of anyone, Mountain Terrace and us at 10 and for solid waste, so.
Can you help me understand the water thing? It may be really clear to everybody but me, but why are there not applicables versus percentage rates on water?
Maybe we should put 0%, there's.
They just chose.
I mean, we
not to.
literally don't. Like, why would a community do that at, a double digit number and another community not do it at all?
So,
I mean, I understand what the data point means. I don't understand what it means.
So one thing that not shown here is franchise fees. So
Okay.
cities can charge utilities, utility taxes or franchise fees or both. So in the case of Kenmore, we don't charge a utility tax on water, but we charge a 5% franchise fee.
And Katrina has that on her spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Franchise fee.
It's just the cost is somewhere.
Yeah, but like take Brooklyn, for example.
Curtains on.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but I do know Kirkland, and Well, pretty sure they charge both franchise fee and utility tax, and so their combined tax on water is in the low teens, like 11 or 12%.
But it seems like some cities, it's in general, like Mount Lake Terrace seems to need a lot of revenue from that, so they must not be getting revenue from some other sources that maybe we are. I mean, if they're.
I live in Mountain Terrace. They did not raise rates for many, many years, and then all of the infrastructure from the sixties and seventies was needed to be replaced, so. My rates in the last 5 years have doubled what they used to be,
Mhm.
so I think that's part of their high utility
There's
tax
pretty
rate
big.
too.
Across the
Yeah.
board.
And cable,
Yeah.
MRSC recommended cable being not higher than the 6%, can raise it above 6%, where Mercer Island has 7%, but said not to be unduly discriminatory.
That'd be a hard thing to prove.
True. But cable's also a revenue source that's diminishing over time, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to put effort into
Right.
that number.
Can accelerate the cable cutting.
The demise.
Well, a minute, yeah.
Yeah,
Some,
and,
it's
and
self-defeating.
and the same with, I guess, natural gas as well, because I mean, for new construction, a lot of them, they're not allowing them to put in natural gas.
So our increases in Kenmore for 2023 was a 4 to 6% in natural gas, and then the 10% solid waste tax that was added. And that covered to cover the climate action plan, housing and human services manager, and the finance session added.
And the cable tax is very almost.
Okay,
That one was before the changes in 2023, though.
So,
That was a part of the last FSP.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we also did change the car tab, but not
That
really part
that
of,
was-
it's not on this chart, but that was a part of the 3 new positions in 2020.
Yeah, because I was noticing on the, for the trash stuff, there was a utility tax and a sales tax. But, and I was trying to look around and find out where that came from, but I think the sales tax would have been based on the fact that you rent your recycle bins. They charge you a sales tax on that, and then there's some utility taxes on like the services they provide, but it was both of those on our bill. And I wasn't sure. I was looking all over the website, trying to figure out why that was. I couldn't find it.
And I'm assuming the sales tax goes to the state. And we get a tiny bit back. Of sales tax, that's the way sales tax generally works.
Oh, okay.
Two thoughts, could you, going back to the last slide?
Sure.
Couple of thoughts, first, just picking up on what Rob said, one of the things that'd be interesting to know as we move on to the next step, is what really is our misuse of term tax efficiency on this. But of these dollars, how much do we really collect? How much really stays with Kenmore versus it stays at the county level or somewhere else? The other thing, for a number of these, it'd be interesting to know, have a conversation about what the policy justification would be. For example, if you look at natural gas, well, we know we want to reduce fossil fuels. That would be an interesting point. And if we look at increasing that, if we look at sewer, look at stormwater, places where we know we need to make a community investment for one reason or another, because infrastructure is reaching the point, or we make a policy decision as a city, we want to maintain that a certain level, a certain service level there, and that includes it. You need to have an investment maybe above the current level that we're making right now. If we think about that as we go, I think you begin to get into a better story as we get into the point of having to explain to the public why we need to increase these taxes. And it may give us an ongoing story, particularly if we're thinking we want to maintain infrastructure. Or we need to make an investment now to be able to have that. That's a good, I think, thing to be thinking about.
And that leads me to something that had been brewing in my head that I wanted to get out there, and I might have misheard you, Carla, but you were saying we put the solid waste in at 10%, and that funded some positions unrelated to solid waste, right? That's a hard story to tell a community, right? Is that we now have a tax in this category, but it's not to pay for this category. It's an offset to other costs we're incurring somewhere else in some other unrelated category. Did I mishear?
Was that more for the climate action plan or for all the
It
positions?
was all bundled together,
Okay.
but yeah, climate action plan was one of the three. It's a good point.
It's just how you speak to things, you know, you may have needed more money for solid waste, but in getting that increase, you also can fund other things with dollars that were being directed to it. But I think when you say this bought us that and they're unrelated to a taxpayer, that can look pretty fishy.
I think that's a good point to be thinking about, because if you go to the public and say, well, we've got a budget, an ongoing structural budget deficit, yawn. If you go out and you say, well, we want to proactively make sure to maintain the infrastructure of the city. And so to do that, we're going to put in an additional sewer fee, additional stormwater fee. That begins, I think, to build some public support out there. Particularly if you've got some information like this to say, hey, we're already under financing, which is why we're in the situation we're in. If we don't correct them and make a change right now, 5 years out, this is gonna look a lot.
Look at Mill Creek, they did it.
Right, that's the
What
perfect
happened? Yeah,
example.
you have an example right in front of us.
Right.
We can keep the prices low, but not forever, and then you're gonna see a big jump.
So we're looking for the long term, not just what's gonna make us happy.
I think the trouble we're gonna find with trying to spin that is that the cost, the reason the lines are crossing is not because like, we're running behind on infrastructure or things like that. It's because keeping the salaries of like the administrative staffing costs to keep that up with inflation is outpacing our biggest source of income, which is property tax. And so we can't do anything with property tax, or at least we have big limitations. And so we kind of want to look at all of the options on the table to say, can we bridge this gap with, these other utility taxes, but it's not necessarily going to infrastructure, things like that. It's going to staff salaries.
Is there any regulation around that? Around when you levy a tax that it pays that thing?
No.
Okay, that's interesting. It's like there's no ethics issue or whatever around.
So there's the difference between a tax and a fee. So a tax has no restrictions. A fee does. A fee has to pay for the thing that we're paying for.
But a lot of the time it ends up being fungible anyway, because you pay for one thing and that puts less pressure on the general fund. So
Yeah.
Right, which is what I mentioned just a bit ago. Sometimes it's an offset that's meaningful, but.
Another example of what Jeff was talking about is police. Every year we have to find several $100,000 more dollars just to keep police the same. And is there some nexus tax out there that helps you pay for police? No. Sales tax, property tax. The closest thing I could think of is, oh, and by the way, ticket revenue doesn't pay for police, just so you guys know. It doesn't even cover your core costs. We pay dollars net to the county court for police after they've spent over ticket revenue, with one exception. You guys know what the exception is? Photo enforcement. That is a moneymaker for the city. And so that's the closest, like what you're talking about, Holly, that's the closest like revenue nexus thing I can come to, for police, is something like that.
So there's like for fire, there's like a special.
Taxing district, is it? not?
Yeah.
It's
Well, yes,
Independent
The
district.
fire
taxing.
department gets money from us in two ways. One is, I forgot the name of it.
The fire benefit charge.
Yes, yeah, fire benefit charge, thank you. And then they also get property tax from us. So the fire benefit charge is based on the quote unquote benefit you're getting from fire, and it's based on the size of your house and things like that. And so a commercial pays more, like a 10,000 square foot office building pays more than a little single family home, because of the size of the building and the fire protection that it gets. So yeah, So
But do we always vote for that tax independently of?
Yeah.
So that's what it, because I think we're always getting the notices that say, you know, we need to levy an increased rate.
Yeah, fire.
You just get a piece of it after we voted directly for that thing.
But I think, no, we vote for the levy, but not necessarily the fire benefit charge, right?
I thought the fire benefit charge comes around for a vote every so often, doesn't it?
Okay.
I could be wrong. The levy doesn't. The levy is council manic or board manic. Unless they wanna go above and beyond what they're allowed to do. Then they have to go to voters.
I wonder if there's some way that we could like do something similar for police and have it just be like a separate line item.
Yeah.
Say like, hey, police services, this is not really there's not a lot we can do. You know, pestering and interrogating our poor police chief about like, what can we do to reduce costs? And it's like, no, we're price takers, we're not price choosers. And so if we could manage it as a separate line item and give it some kind of different set of rules, then maybe that could put less pressure in the long term on the trajectory of those costs. If police costs are rising at 5 to 10% a year, then, you know, managing that cost separately. And then I think that would also be more palatable, because people are generally supportive of maintaining our level of service for police.
If there was like a police levy, if there was a voter approved levy for police services, kind of like we approve fire services.
Yeah.
Then it directly benefits, you know, that.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of bringing me to putting on the table something that I shared otherwise is one of the options I think we might want to look at some point is a metropolitan park district. Nothing is more acceptable to the taxpayer, particularly Kenmore, as in supporting our parks are in the Beach metro area. The metropolitan park district, which could be contiguous with city limits, it has its own separate taxing authority. Do councilmatic bonds as well as to straight revenue bonds. And you have the opportunity to put that out there. And to the extent that that can plan general fund expenditure separately, I think that not only a revenue source there, you also have an increased acceptability to having that levy.
Are you saying that like surface water, for example, which is a separate self-maintaining budget, that the parks could become that and not be a burden on the general fund?
Take your park maintenance fees, the upkeep of it, as well as expansion, acquisition of new property in order to develop new parks. All of that could be rolled into potentially into a metropolitan park district. And that becomes the revenue source of that, which we then supply the city expenditure.
Be an easier sell for most taxing districts than give us more money for the police.
I think
Mhm.
a
lot of people have contentious relationship to law enforcement.
Parks districts don't always go through either.
And you can also do a simple park levy lid lift like Bellevue did a year or two ago. Where you just, the voters approve a levy lid lift in their property tax for parks purposes. And
And then does that become a restricted fund to the park?
Yeah.
And then it offsets the general fund expenditures
Yeah.
for the park. Okay.
And Maple Valley just last November did a levy lid lift for police. And it passed,
Oh, did?
yeah. And they just, and they contract with King County like we do, and they said, hey, voters, our police contract just went up by 14%, we need your help, and it went to the voters, and the voters said yes.
So it's not necessarily a hard charge to ask for more money for law enforcement. May depend on the
Depends.
community and the community's issues, right?
Maple Valley is a little more conservative and maybe a little,
Yeah.
But those levy lid lifts, those are again, it doesn't solve the systemic problem, the structural problem of costs going up faster than revenues. It's just a one-time bump up and then the line crosses again and then.
It has a lifespan, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you have to
Yeah.
re-levy.
if you want to, I know you've got another slide or two, but if you want to, I can talk to you about levy lid lifts, if that interests you. Because there's different, what they call, flavors of levy lid lifts. Is that interesting to you guys? You want to talk about that right now?
I'm certainly
What's
interested
the
in some.
word, levy?
Lid,
Levy
lid.
lifts. Here's how a levy lift works is, so cities can only increase their property tax by 1%. You've heard me talk about
Yes,
that, right?
that was an idea.
That's at the councilmanic level, but if they want to increase by more than 1%, they have to go to the voters to approve that. And, so you can do a one-time bump that's permanent and then grows by 1% thereafter. Or you can do a 6-year levy where it expires after 6 years and you have to go back to your voters for approval for that. And the latter one, you can do as a one-time bump that expires in 6 years, or you can do a multi-step increase over the 6 years, but still expires after 6 years.
Why would you ever choose that over just resetting your baseline with a bump and getting a cash infusion?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that, but
But it's an option.
I think I spoke too soon because I think there's another flavor. They call them flavors. But you can find more about that in the in MRSC's revenue guide if you're interested. You can find out all about it. It's called the Revenue Guide for Cities and Towns. Maybe we can send.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, that revenue guide, if you guys really want to get nerdy, then read that revenue guide because it's all sorts, talks about all sorts of revenue options for cities.
It's only a short 187 page.
Yeah.
Went right to it, you're good.
Well, when you say something is specific.
Specific.
And more
Give us
FSP
the
revenue
exact
guide for cities and towns.
You just Googled it.
Yeah. Google's, they're pretty good at their jobs.
So when it says no limit, I'm just kind of harking back to the story of the 10% solid waste. When it says no limit, you guys could just say, you know, we're gonna recommend to city council that we make that 15. And it doesn't have to be explained to the voter. It's just something they see the next time around they have to pay.
You probably
And you-
have an explanation to go with it, but.
Okay. Well, to get the approval from city council, you would have to have that, and then that's public record and all of that. But would you ever say, we want to move this up to 15%, because it's one of the only ways we can get money for other things that are not solid waste that we need to afford? Or do you have to demonstrate for that type of approval that it is specific to that need?
No, it's a tax, so.
It's just, this is where we're gonna apply a tax to fund whatever needs funded. We're gonna call it a solid waste increase. That's fascinating to me.
You had a question over?
Well, what is the kind of the mood of the current council towards revenue increases? Because I think I believe, I recall you saying, when we make recommendations, they're gonna have to approve everything, correct? So I'm just curious to know kind of, you know.
What's their
are they-
appetite?
Yeah,
I don't know what their appetite is lately. I can tell you what they've done in the past.
okay.
When I first got here, I saw a gap in the budget and I proposed, vehicle license fee and also franchise fee for water and sewer. Those two things combined, the franchise fees and the license tabs, those two things combined raised about $1 million a year and bought us time for a while. And then we did the financial sustainability plan from 2020 and task force recommended several tax increases there. And the council's been following that plan. Hey, one more thing on levy lid lifts. I forgot to make my point. And that is, there's different flavors, but to what Jeff's getting at is they're still just short-term solutions because they may be a one-time bump, but then they only grow by 1% from then on. Even if it's a 6-year levy, it can only grow by 1% of what the bump was.
It's really just a one-time cash infusion, right? That runs out and your lines start crossing again.
Yeah, one way, yeah, I think like if you put on a graph, let's say your costs are going like this, maybe you wanna increase the bump up here. So that they meet. And then-
Further out.
Yeah, and then you know the voters when they meet. Or you make
There's
cuts.
no changing the slope. You can change the base, but you can't change. the slope.
Exactly.
Of the expenditures.
No, of the set,
It's 1% per year period.
Oh, yeah, the 1%, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless we want our entire staff to only have 1% raises.
Sure.
Yeah. You know?
It's a great way.
Can you go to the voter and say, law says 1% per year ad infinitum? We want it to be 1.4% per year ad infinitum. Can somebody vote that in, or is it
No.
always a lifespan?
You have to set the rate. And then it grows by 1%.
But the rate is for a one-time dump of cash, essentially.
It's an ongoing new revenue source, because you increase the rate. Let's say you increase the rate by, I'll pick a number, 10%. Now you got that much more money to work with every year. So it's not a one-time dump of cash. It's a new.
It's not lifted for that property tax year for a big chunk of change. It's spread out over the lifespan of the thing.
It's.
It's lifted for 6 years,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
growing at 1% also.
So the 10, 1, 11, the next 12.
Let's say this is 1% of growth. Let's say, I know that's not 1%, but let's say it is. What you can do is, you can do a one-time bump. Then that grows at 1%. So you have all this, these are years. So yeah.
Raise the baseline,
Yeah.
and then the 1% grows on that.
So each year you have this much more money to work with. Yeah. Or you could also do that multi-step thing that I talked about over 6 years. And,
So there's three bars, right? If you think about like, so here's our like assessed value, right? And then, so we get some percentage, it's the $8 per $1,000 of assessed value. And so that's how much revenue we get, and then expenses, right? And so this grows at, 5% per year.
Yeah.
This can go 1%, and this is growing at
Yeah.
whatever housing.
Yeah.
And so this step up just means that we get to move this from here to here,
Mhm.
but then the slope is still the same.
I'm asking this because in the library, we lived by lid lifts and we tried to keep them only going out to the voters once every decade. If we could, because otherwise, there's tax fatigue and all that.
Yeah.
And people don't understand libraries and what they do anyway. But what we would get is a huge dump of cash that we then held, invested, and used over time.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out if that's another way that this can happen for municipality as well.
Maybe. Let's say that, this blue line is your revenue, but let's say this black line is your expenditures. Yeah,
Right.
and so I think what you're talking about is you can sock away this cash. And help you get out further, maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
that
that
makes
makes your.
your fiscal management versus how the levy itself works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You plan for a higher, what is it that we have 30% reserves, a higher reserve as a percentage of expenses for those first 3 years, and then
Then you draw down those reserves once you get past this point.
yeah.
That's right.
I think the trade-off though is you're saying to John Public, we want your money in our bank account, not in your bank account for the next 6 years.
Because we're gonna make money on it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm gonna say, well, maybe I wanna keep it in my bank, account. You call me in 6 years.
Yeah, I think we also get into a behavioral issue you have to think about. That But you
The
got-
psychology of the individual.
There,
Yeah,
I also wanted
that's
to,
not called for. There are lots of people throughout the community who are gonna have ideas how to spend that money. And so you're almost setting yourself up to have that argument every year anyway. And I'm not advocating for one or another, but if you have this sort of gradual increase with the slope, that maybe begin to approximate that expense increase, you get to buy yourself out of that. Probably having those funds reallocated, let me say, deviated to something other than what was intended to.
And I wanted to comment on saying like we have this money to then invest and make money off of. Well, we are a governmental agency and we can only invest in bonds. And so
the returns are limited.
yes,
Yeah,
there's not a whole lot of money to be made there. So it's not
you're
like.
not gonna have an aggressive global
Mm,
portfolio.
No. So-
We wouldn't have to either, because we don't wanna be on the other side of that equation.
Right.
Regardless.
So it's, yeah, it's,
And it's, but we are getting like 5%.
yeah.
Right now,
First,
Yeah.
right now, exactly.
yeah.
But we were getting like 0.05 before, so.
So this is probably the dumbest question ever, but can cities have their own fundraising arm, like a foundation?
Never heard of one.
I haven't either,
haven't
but I'm just,
either.
because a lot of other agencies will have a fundraising arm. That finds major donors and throws events and brings in dollars, and there must be some regulations
Is it
about
library
that.
district even?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
They all do. From the local library up to the system level, and that's, they bring in, it's not, well, I think it depends on the library system, but it can be a good chunk of change.
And that's actually part of the organization, the library organization, it's not a 503.
They vary. Sometimes their principals are hired by the library system, but
Really?
finances are separate, and sometimes it's entirely separate. And they're funded out of their own proceeds.
Especially for those, what did we call it? The extras, there's the core and the enhanced, especially for the enhanced
Yeah.
stuff, like the events.
Friends of the city of Kenmore.
Yeah, you know,
Is that through the economic development team? Or exactly really focuses a lot on, revenue ideas or?
The enhanced services that they're.
Yeah, or just in general, like, we were also just brainstorming previously about, hey, how can we get some of this property to make money for us, right? How can we get property we've already bought generating revenue to where everything in Kenmore is contributing in one way or another? And so I didn't know if that was under the economic development team that was talking, or is that anybody can come up with that?
Yeah, anybody, depends on the department, I guess, so like property management is in public works, so.
Just found the idea of the foundation in Anacortes. Anacortes was very lucky and got its hands around about 1,000 acres of forest land, which they put into a special fund. Controlling that, and then they have ownership of the land, management of the land. But then they also have associated with the Friends of Anacortes Forest Land, which has thousands of members to it, each paying an annual membership fee, having all sorts of fundraising to go along with it. And at this point, the city basically bought that 1,000 acres based upon those dollars and preserving it out into the future. So I think, yes, I think there's a model out there using a foundation not necessarily associated with the city, but associated with other instruments where you can use that to generate more revenue.
And offset other costs.
Hey, right, at the same time, they've got thousands of voters out there. Who This is something that's near and dear to the hearts. And we're gonna support.
Is that staff, they still, bringing sponsorship from businesses, and it's not a lot of money, but that's just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For events like Fourth of July and concerts.
So did you get in Kenmore's water? I think you had shown a map too that said, there's a lot, like, how many miles were of waterways or water that,
Oh, 7 point something.
yeah, it was a large.
We have some data from one of your staff around that. Yeah, it's on one of the slide decks.
Just curious, just start thinking like,
the-
do we have a port? You know, like some of the things that generate a lot of revenue in other cities. I don't know, my ignorance of, does Kenmore have some of that? You know, to where we're generating more revenue from our water.
We generate a little bit of revenue from water, for example, we get a percentage, I think it's 10% of kayak rentals at
Yeah.
Rockville.
Yeah.
Kidding.
Yeah, cause, yeah, I was wondering about that, cause last week she was talking about the parks. And she said that, we work with Skate Like a Girl and Skyhawks. So basically, we're giving them like exclusive use of the field or the park area at that time. But do we get any revenue from them?
Yeah, I thought we do from Skyhawks. Skyhawks is for profit, so we should get some from Skyhawks.
I just remember still.
And then like, do we help them cover like the scholarship kids on those when we do that?
So,
Cause and then she was also talking about, cause I was also thinking, so like at that, the park over on 175th, so the Kenmore Waterfront Activity Center, which I believe is a nonprofit. So do we let them use that house there? I think the house is still standing, right?
it's a 3-car garage, yeah.
Okay, so we let them use that, so we maintain it as part of our parks, right? But then do we let them have free use of that facility?
Yes, so the arrangement is in exchange for them providing programming for the public. They get to use that garage and dock space for free.
Okay, and then the kayak rental storage over there, they get to keep all that money too?
Yeah, but they're supposed to invest in scholarships for kids.
Oh, okay. And then, but the shelter at that park, we're gonna put on with the other shelters, right?
Yeah, we're gonna start allowing the public to reserve shelters and use them.
Okay. Cause then, at Rhodey, we also have a house there. Right, do we maintain that for the senior center?
Yes,
And then they get to use that for free because they're a nonprofit?
that's right.
Okay. But then, so then we also have the boathouse at Rhodey. So, do we, if there's not a nonprofit using that, right? So are we charging them rent?
So the school district uses it and a nonprofit uses it. And that is a really long, complicated story, but the
I
school
listened to the North Shore budget meeting and that, yeah.
Yeah, the school
I can
district's
try to give
leading.
a 2-minute summary, so the boathouse is like 1 something million, 1.3-ish million. And most of that was raised through grants, so we got $250,000 from the state, 600,000 from the county. And then $250,000 from school district. So what that's about 1.1 billion. And so still must have been more than one, must have been like 1.4, because the school district, or I mean, the rowing community was supposed to fundraise the remaining 300,000. So we said, hey, most of it's being paid for through grants in the school district. The you rowing community, you need to come up with the remaining 300,000. And they said, okay, we'll start fundraising. And then the pandemic happened. And they couldn't fundraise. They were just frozen like everybody else. And we decided to keep moving forward with the boathouse. So we bid it out, we got it built. We loaned ourselves for the money from strategic ops with the expectation that they would fundraise and pay us back that 300,000. They never did. And now the school district is getting out of the boathouse because of their situation with their finances. And so now we're looking to have a new nonprofit come in and run youth rowing. And what the council wants to do is start charging rent to start chipping away at that 300,000. So that's the nutshell story.
Yeah, so we
was good.
will rent that one out and try to recoup some of those costs.
Eventually, yeah, probably starting in 2025, fall of 2025, I think is when that would kick in.
Because we're doing the maintenance on that building as well,
That's right.
right? So,
The school is supposed to provide a manager of boathouse too, right?
Yeah,
right.
They also will not be.
that's right.
So we'll have will the nonprofit then would be funding the boathouse manager or will we?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Okay.
And that gets back to the city of Kenmore's recreation model.
Yeah.
You've heard us talk about it before, right? No, okay, yeah, give us some head shake. So there's some cities that fully get into the recreation business, like Kirkland, for example. They hire recreation coordinators to run T-ball and baseball and basketball and soccer and underwater basket league and, well, not underwater basket, but, you know,
Yeah.
but like pottery classes and stuff. They have on staff, city staff that are running those programs. We do the cheap version. We say, hey, nonprofits and for-profits, you come provide these rec services at your expense, the revenues you raise, and in exchange, you can use our city facilities. And so that way, we're not in the rec business, but we are providing the venue for these folks to come and start. But so, for example, like Little League, you know, instead of us running Little League, we have the North Shore Little League Association or whatever they're called. They come in and do it, but they actually do pay us a fee for using the fields.
Right, yeah. Cause that's a lot more maintenance to do the fields than it is to do a regular park, which we'd probably be doing the park maintenance a lot anyway, just for our citizens.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of getting it in line, so all of them are kind of equal now and.
actually, but yeah, and there are a couple of exceptions where we do get in the recreation business, and that's events. So we run our own events. But other than events, we are in the contract out model for rec.
So there's not so much budget, but you know, as a parent to young kids, I do send my kids to City of Kirkland or Shoreline for the Parks and Rec classes, and I noticed Lake Forest Park partner with Shoreline. So that they have priority in signing up for classes a day ahead than other people, like, you know. Used to Kirkland will let anybody resident or non-resident, but the rate's different. And now they let their residents sign up a week ahead, so it creates some challenges for me signing up classes with my kids. Are those like, so we don't have our own parks and rec, but instead of contracting to for profit, like, are there any more like looking at partnership with like Shoreline, for example? Would that be more cost effective and maybe more accessibility for people too? Cause it's like the recreation classes from kids to adults. Oh,
Interesting, yeah, I haven't thought of that before. And so Lake Forest Park, to have that arrangement, do they pay
I don't know.
Shoreline a sum of money?
Yeah, I'm curious, cause
Yeah.
Shoreline resident obviously get signed up, like for example, for spring, Shoreline resident gets signed up like March 18th, and Lake Forest Park's like March 19th, and everyone else March 20th, something like that.
Interesting.
So brings to mind that when we start talking about recommendations, that one of the criteria that might be really meaningful for us is the return on investment of the recommendation. You know, so say, for example, we moved, because Katrina, you seem to be interested in a rental model, or at least Ken, we're getting something financially out of parks and park services, right? What would that realize, and how meaningful is the effort toward that based on what it would realize? And so it just brought to mind, and I thought I'd put it out, that I think, you know, key criteria for us obviously is the impact lens and disproportionate impact, but also return on investment of the recommendation. How much power does it punch?
Right. Yeah, 'cause I was thinking, you're talking about the solid waste, and why would you like tax that if it wasn't really going to solid waste? I was thinking, so, the solid waste one is where everybody is actually required to participate in it. So that's the one place you can tax where it actually does cover everybody in the city versus, some of the others. But it also, to me, gets down to like, it's like, if we're doing a little bit on every different one of them, if people start feeling like they've been nickeled and dimed and they don't really know, whereas when you just say, okay, we're gonna remove the taxes from here and just do this one.
Yeah, there's also the psychology of impact,
Right.
not just actual impact, right?
You're not feeling like
Right.
you've just been nickeled and dimed and it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think Carlos got one more slide.
would have been done, but I think I got 6 more slides.
Oh.
Somebody wanted to add some things today. Well, the last one was just 5%. General utility tax revenues per capita. So this is the budgeted numbers, for the 2-year budget per city, we expect to get utility tax revenues. And then the per capita, 8 cities generate between 5.5% and 14.8%.
It's a big range.
Yeah. The range of per capita revenue between $46 and $198. Wow. Average is $113 between the 7 cities. Kenmore sits in the middle with 77.2.
Yeah.
I feel like we really need to put the franchise fee. Just like combine it with the franchise fee to get a apples to apples comparison.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree
Yeah.
with you too.
Okay, and FTEs per capita. So a couple of the cities, Mount Lake Terrace, they have also taken out the police, fire, court, but some of them have, Mount Lake Terrace has recreation. And more, these are the budgeted numbers. We added 4 positions after the budget was finalized. And we removed 1 position, so. Other than Mill Creek is lower than we are. Mill Creek also, looking at their budget, they don't have recreation or events or any human services, so they're running pretty lean.
I mean, what that would tell us data wise is that, Kenmore already runs exceptionally lean in comparison to comparables in terms of staffing.
So that, and that's reflective of our
Yeah.
contract city
Mhm.
philosophy.
Yeah.
As well.
right, that's even compared to other contract cities.
I mean, it's a spectrum, right? Like, it's always gonna be a spectrum.
This does adjust for things like police and fire.
Police, fire, and court were removed from the count. But like I said, recreation, which I. Shoreline, I mean, recreation staff.
So you're saying whether these are contract or non-contract cities, the adjustment's been made so that it's an apples to apples
Yeah.
FTE per thousand.
But there's still like, you know, we used to contract with Shoreline for parks maintenance and stuff like that. Now that's in-house. That you were just talking about some of the other areas, the right of way assessments and the other thing that we were contracting with King County. So like, we are still very heavily a contract city, but some of these things we've moved in-house that I don't think are adjusted for here necessarily.
Oh, I assume they would have been.
Our public works department, we took from Lake Forest Park used to be who we contracted with, so they're included. in there.
Right, but for those other cities that may or may not have those, or do they all have them included?
All of them have public works. And they all have public works departments.
You're
I
right.
don't think they even
But it would be-
contract
It's just not gonna be a perfect comparison. You're not gonna
It's
go,
not apples to oranges, but
Right.
it's various versions of apples.
so all I'm trying to say is that 2.35 is a reflection of both A, efficiency, and B, that we are still heavily contract.
Right, yeah.
How is the workload demand on city staff? Roughly.
That was pretty darn
It's
high.
it's the number one thing that always comes up when I interview my coworker, or when I survey my coworkers, is competing workload demands.
I mean, I look at Mount Lake and it's almost 3 times.
Not a contract city.
Oh, thank you.
But who is that?
Not like Terrace.
Mount Lake Terrace. And
Yeah, but we did take out police, fire and court
Yeah,
to try to get it as close as possible.
and it seemed very high. That's almost, there's,
Yeah, I still think if it's an
But if they're
FTE per thousand resident, those numbers are pretty close. I think they're pretty reflective once you've removed those other contract services, even with occasional differentials otherwise.
Mhm.
Okay.
But I'm hearing we don't wanna make that number smaller and in an ideal, that
Yeah,
number would
no.
be bigger.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Good bottom line.
Yeah.
Is if you make that number smaller too, you know, dealing with turnover. I spoke with someone a while back at Shoreline and after COVID, they lost like a third of their staff, or 200 people, because people wanted to telework 100%. And, you know, we want people to be here for the public too, and they weren't, you know, they were allowing some positions to telework up to 3 days a week. And I think in general, cities around here, you see where years ago it was like, oh, you got a government job, you know, it's stable and you have good benefits and people weren't, they were staying long term, and now it seems to be kind of more trend. People are really going elsewhere, going to other cities or going to private organizations, so I want to keep staff we have.
Yeah. Well,
If you wanna lose efficiency, turnover is the way to go.
right, exactly. Well, that just kind of adds to criteria for the value of our recommendations, which is there are non-financial costs to reducing financial costs.
Yes.
Right, and I think that's one of the ones you're describing, which is something to keep track of as we're doing this work.
Recruiting costs money.
Yeah.
Right,
Staff time interviewing and going through applications.
Well, in other categories like losing the support of the voters because you've decimated your system so much that you read like a loser and not a winner and no one backs a loser. Right, so you have to care about stuff like that when you're thinking about how you reduce and where you reduce.
Mhm.
So if you're talking about staff reductions, really the only thing that I would say would be on the table is if you were looking at those enhanced programs and said, okay, we're not gonna do an enhanced program, therefore, how many staff does that mean? Versus, you know, oh, we can use one less finance person, you know, it's like, well, no. That.
You make it sound so easy.
Right, right, exactly, so,
Yeah.
yeah, it really gets down to that at this point because of the way we run.
Okay, determine, now these were added.
Oh, you've got my point at bullet number 3, more or less, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so these are just, this is
Yeah.
not talking about what are the impacts of these different strategies, right? How does it impact, the, city staff? How does it impact the community? And then how do you weigh all those thoughts? So that's what this is gonna get into, is how do you weigh all these different ways of looking at potential, changes to the budget, right? Reductions, adds.
And then the strategies using the following tables. Level of difficulty and the factors used.
So this is something that was used the last time around, right, through, Tollers methods. And so, you know, you have these different factors and then, how difficult will it be to implement, right? So, oh, we want to raise taxes. Well, how much pushback are we gonna get from the community, right? Potentially medium to high, right, depending on how much and where it's at. So how technical and operationally difficult is it to implement, right? Because then that's gonna be a weight and a burden on staff and everything else they're trying to do. So this is just a way to kind of look at where things might land. And then if you look down to the bottom, you can stratify those also into costs. So low fiscal impact, right? 50,000 or less, moderate between 50 to 100, and then high over 100,000. And then there's another chart next.
So the high fiscal impact are usually more difficult to implement. But if you look at the numbers in the green here,
So easy and raises a lot of.
yes, yes.
A lot of.
Sounds special, but.
You set up a lot of those last
Yeah, the first committee got the low hanging.
Absolutely. You might be yellow. Hopefully not red.
So speaking of that, there, we have been following the task force recommendations since 2020. Council's been. There is one new tax that's scheduled for this year that I'm actually having second thoughts about, and it's the admissions tax. So that's what the last task force recommended for 2024. But the more we look into it, the less money, the less fiscal impact, less money it's looking like it's going to raise. So Garrett Oppenheim actually researched it and called different cities and he wrote a memo on it. We should share that memo with you, but it would only impact two businesses, the bowling alley and golf course. And so we thought it would raise about 200,000 a year. It's probably closer to like 100,000 a year. And for two businesses to take on that impact just doesn't sit well with me anymore. So I'd like you guys to reconsider that if you don't mind. If you still want to recommend it, you can, but we're kind of holding off on that this year, and we'd like to get your thoughts on it as well. So.
That would be
That
from,
was a question.
from actually, I mean, it's typically gonna be Kenmore residents that are visiting the bowling alley or the golf club and paying that.
I think they get a lot of outside visitors, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I live on the Kenmore. I live on Inglewood Shores Golf Course.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do get a lot out of town. And they do a lot of tournaments and stuff.
So,
I'm sure we need some more discussion on this, but when I think about the future of Kenmore, where potential new revenue sources are, it's going to be attracting people into the city. So something like an admission tax, I think, is going
Would
to
not.
push against that. So off the top of my head, I like that idea, so we're thinking it, Rob. I think it's probably something that's more compatible with our strategic vision of the city than anything else.
so one more thing, so Edward wanted all the departments to give 10 and 15% cut scenarios. And you guys saw all that, right? You saw his. Based on what you've seen tonight, you still want us to go through that exercise? It's totally up to you. You want to rely on the SLB method and get the information Edward's asking for. I need direction from you guys on what you're looking for.
My opinion, when I read that, I thought it was make work. In the sense that I don't know that it's going to particularly inform this process in a meaningful way after having seen those presentations. And I think it was you that said earlier, that just this cuts across the board aren't actually possible typically, because we don't know what we don't know, and just slashing X percentage from every working group to me, it's not a reasonable or intelligent approach to navigating a budget problem. Because those things don't all weigh the same thing, and they're not all budgets that apply to our work anyway. So I'd be for not doing that. That's an opinion.
In respect to Edward, I don't have a need for it.
I would agree. 35 years of budgeting, I've seen that approach fail about as many times as proposed. I just don't see it as productive. And I think the impact it has on your staff is something that price should pay for years into the future. Actually, I would go the other way. We've got some significant strategic planning for this city to be rated to growth and population density. That has to have an impact on your staffing. I think we need to see what that is and understand what that is and where it is. And we need to include that in any of our considerations. So I know I'm going the opposite way of everything we've been talking about in terms of expense reduction. But I think if you don't do that, our strategic plan isn't going to be able to pay for certain.
I I prefer being more surgical, like we were talking tonight, than being across the board like GE. You know, I'd rather be more surgical.
Yeah, like the tiers or like that core basic and
Yeah.
enhanced.
That's the one. I prefer.
Cause I think in general, I think people, well, we can't get rid of the core. In general, I don't think there's many people that live in the city that want to be a basic city. So I think if we just focus on whatever the enhanced and then adding revenue to.
If you guys want us to go through the exercise, we will. I'm not trying to steer you in any direction. But
I think what Edward and I'm on the fence. Because although I'm not, as someone who has also done budgeting and has done these kinds of top-down, everybody cuts. They often don't work, but they often give you information. And so I think that what he's doing is not, or what he's suggesting is not, everybody give us 10% cuts, and that's what we're going to suggest. But we're looking for information, because like usually when I approach a budget, I have a lot of data to work with, and I have very little data. You know, we've gone through a couple of presentations, but I don't have a data set to go through. I don't have a head count report. I don't have, like, there's a lot of data that I would normally be combing through at a very with a fine tooth comb, that I don't have. And so requesting everybody to kind of go through their budget with a fine tooth comb and give us information is something that I am interested in. I don't know if the phrasing of this is not the right way to phrase it, and it is more in line with the SLB, or however we want to talk about it. But each of your department leaders and managers are the ones that have the information and know where those programs are that could be cut or those kinds of things. And we don't. So however we want to solicit that information from them, I think that we do need to solicit that information. I just don't know if this is the right way or a different way is better.
Perhaps the more productive way to approach that is to ask for managers, and I see this work, is what recommendations or suggestions you have for increasing productivity in your department. Have that information and knowledge they have. See, they may be at this point so lean that there isn't anything realistic that they can put on the table. Then again, there may be one or two ideas out there that would be useful, and you can approach that in a positive way.
Yeah, I was just brewing over like kind of a scenario thing, like what if Rob came to each of you and said, you know, we're really in a crisis here. What are the top 3 things you could give up, and what are their dollar values? If it's something like that, and only in the areas where it matters to the work we're charged with. But I think having budgeted at large levels, for a large organization for many years that had targets and cuts and growth and all of that happening, it is an enormous amount of effort to fine tooth comb your departmental budget for savings versus off at the level we'll be operating at, offering a more of a narrative approach that's more at a thing level than at a data point level. Maybe that could be the happy medium between the two.
And also I think adding the lens of not only productivity, which I love, but also revenue generating. What ideas?
Yeah.
You know, what ideas?
Right, it's not the losses, it's
That
the
maybe, you know,
additive.
we
Yeah.
They know,
poo-pooed before, or, you know, without a budget.
they
What
know the
ideas?
process that we're going through, right? And I think that empowering them to be, you know, like, we've seen that the city staff here are team players, you know, like they do incredible things. We appreciate what they do. It's not that we're like a team of executives that's prescribing the budget. It's, hey, we trust you. And yeah, like you said, right? Like one of the problems with this approach is when you operate in good faith and then they don't, right? So our plan is to operate in good faith, right? To say like, hey, we trust you. We trust that if push comes to shove, right, that you know what to do and you know what we're trying to achieve here. And if you say that there's nothing to cut here, that we're already too lean, we will believe, you know, that there's trust there on our side as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way to make them our partners in this work, rather than pushing back or being negative about this and and not wanting to contribute. But I think that's the art to it. If there's an art to budgeting or art to the deal here, I hate to use that, but I think that's it. I think it's our side.
But that leads to a question for me. I agree with all of this that's being said. The question for me is there a part of the process where this group of people who are very thoroughly but minimally informed about the city's operations at the just sort of meta level, is there some sort of smell test that our recommendations go through before they go to city council? That they're feasible, that they're doable, that there isn't something we missed that makes it completely weird
Okay,
or whatever, so.
we're not gonna leave you guys to.
Yeah.
To your devices here, we're like.
We come up with a list and you guys are like,
No.
ixnay.
Yeah.
Just watch Rob's face as the decision.
So I think there's already a back end check and it'd be nice to have a front end partnership as well.
Right,
Absolutely,
yeah.
right,
Yeah.
great, but you know, the town council, city council, public meeting will be one of the really useful tools here. If we can, if somebody,
The town hall.
yeah, the town hall can get up in front of people and explain, this is the situation we're in, and this is the best solutions we can come up with. And can take the feedback that you get. I think that's a key piece of that, but you're right. We need to touch base with the city council and a number of other opinion leaders in the city to understand just exactly what's acceptable. How close are we to that? How persuadable are they? And what's the level of resistance? I suspect that what we've already talked about here, there's enough here that I think is positive. That we're lucky because the city financially, economically, the citizenship is doing pretty well. And they like, I think, for the most part, the services they get, and they want to have a well-functioning city. So I think if we go to them and say, okay, we can't give you what you want unless we do this, and here's the way we think is the most equitable way to do it, I think you get a good response.
Well, I think there's also a message around the fact that our society, the state of Washington, has set it up specifically to be this way. This is a design, it's not, crisis, I heard you, I don't wanna say crisis, this is a design situation. This was the plan, is to go force the constituents to agree to all the spending along the way. So I think for them to understand that would be a pretty important part of it as well, that even when we do this, this is not a one-time or two-time deal.
Right,
We're not gonna solve the 1% property tax law.
right. And so, how long has this 1% limit been in place?
Since 2001 was I-747, and it was declared unconstitutional, but the state legislature said, well, the voters have spoken, and so the state legislature made it law.
It was a Tim Iman initiative.
That's what I was just, okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna say his name, but okay. So I mean, so at first it probably was working okay, because like you were finding those inefficiencies and cutting back, but now we're 23 years down the road and we've gotten all of those out and now it's causing.
Yeah, I think some cities are buying time with ARPA dollars. I know a neighboring city that it is buying time with ARPA dollars, but that money's gonna run out. We're actually, in a way, my recommendation is gonna be to use ARPA dollars to pay ourselves back with general fund for when we bought Holt 2 years ago. I talked to you about that.
Yeah.
So the way we're using our dollars, but we're actually
This whole,
paying.
the one by Safeway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole property, yeah. Well, keeping you past your bedtime here.
I know, especially me.
These are good discussions. I
Really
just
good.
love the dynamic and your ideas, and I can tell you're into this. It's really great to see.
It's fantastic. So we wanted to touch base on the engagement HQ and balancing act tool. There's not a lot to say about the balancing act tool yet. That'll come later. But we do want to kick off the engagement HQ. Truth be told, I have not read in detail. I know you've put together a lot of stuff. I haven't read every line of that. I've skimmed these emails. so I know that there's been good discussion. I don't know if you guys want to chat amongst yourselves some more, but I know there's been good conversation about, and lots of people added things to ground rules. And to, fuck, I'm drawing a blank. What else was in there?
Questions for.
Questions for the community. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, there was like 4 of us that wrote on that.
Yes.
one Document.
And I added very late to it. I apologize. I
no.
was sick.
No, it's fine. Yeah. So, anything we need to talk about here, I need to go back and look at those. I don't know if you've read them carefully or not. I haven't.
No, I did send you
Mhm.
some of the questions from the balancing actual back in 2020. Jeff might remember the.
Yeah,
I think
like-
examples of different questions.
Yeah, like one of the questions was, should we use our bank capacity?
Yeah.
And so, and we are.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if they say
That's
yes or no, but we're using it. So, but
We don't
yeah,
have any more bank capacity, I think, right?
well, we're using it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so-
The other questions from the 2020 from that might be good topics though, or
Mhm.
things to put out there for discussion.
Well, but maybe to better answer your question about bank capacity, we have some left. But but using it is already in our forecast.
Yep.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely. So what I will propose is, I'll read through all your stuff, and see what I can answer. I know that I see there's some here that I can just easily answer questions. And then I'll, talk with Lauren, because Lauren's kind of the expert in getting this off the ground. And then I'll come back and I'll say, here's what the initial plan is, and see if you guys have any concerns. So I'll do a message, out to our group messaging and just make sure everybody's good to go. Does that sound good? Because I know you guys have done your homework. I just haven't read your homework. I haven't graded it.
Yeah. I think that, you know, we've sort of brain dumped.
Right,
And it just needs somebody to
Right.
consolidate and clean it up.
yep,
Clump and dump.
yep.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Cause I was actually looking for something else on the city website and I came across, apparently there was a group making the, videos about civics 101. So if that was ever done, that kind of stuff seemed like would be a good way of explaining to people how some of this worked. Did that project ever get done? I just saw things like we were gonna do it.
No, we one of
Okay.
those competing workload demand issues. We tried to make it happen.
Okay.
It couldn't.
We could get some high school students, you know.
That's what they were doing. They had in.
Oh, okay, great, yeah. We're doing-
I think we produced 2 or 3 videos. But
But it sounded like the kind of thing that would be an easy way to explain to the public, various things that we've been talking.
we have to have a podcast that we're doing.
Yeah.
Listen, we'll cut your episode.
Excellent.
We're good.
All right. Anything else for tonight? So, yeah, next meeting, March something.
Can we set up calendar invites
Yes, I agree.
for all of the meetings?
That would be lovely.
Yeah,
I keep meaning to like just put them all on
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
but if we just
Yeah,
want to make them and invite everybody,
We will get that taken care of.
thank you.
I know, because I've had a couple people reach out, like, what time and different times and different days.
Have to
And
go find that
because we have
email.
3 meetings in March.
Right.
So we have the 6th, the 14th, which is a Thursday, and then the 20th, I guess.
Things that I outsource for my brain to technology.
I'm not able to change my plan.
Okay, no worries. Yeah,
On the 14th.
thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I just ask if you guys can't make it, that it's all being recorded, so you just listen to the recording and look up the presentations. All these will get put out with the minutes, so. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's.
Hey, Jeff, if there's things that you remember from last time, if there's certain reports or things that you want electronically, I assume, can you let me know?
Model. The model. It's the first thing.
Yes.
That's what I built Yeah, because Steve took the model